Hello and welcome back to another live session here from Graph HQ in the video studio. And we're back with Rainwater Research and we're back with David. How are you, David?
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me back. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How was your birthday?
Yeah, very good. Lots of cake eaten, lots of games played with the nieces and nephews. Yep, takeaway, eaten, gone.
Yep.
Another year older, another year not so wise.
How old, if you don't mind me asking?
It begins with the 3.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think you would class it as mid-30s now, based on your conversation from last time.
Mid-30s, got it. And who made the lemon drizzle cake?
I did. I made a lemon drizzle cake for the office this time.
And how long did it last for?
Well, it was gone within the working day.
It was a very lovely lemon drizzle cake. That's one of your signatures, isn't it?
It's one of the staples, yeah, of the bakes that I do.
It is wonderful. It's absolutely, truly wonderful.
They don't need to know that. They're not going to have this opportunity to taste it.
They might do. We might have an open day. We might have like a bake set and we invite all our listeners.
It's been a while since we did do Bake Off.
We did. So yeah, for context, we did a Graph UK Bake Off. When was this? 2019? I think it was before
2018, 2019. I think.
Yeah, it would have been October, November time, 2019, because it's based in December or based in the winter, isn't it? When it's on TV.
No. Yeah, sorry. Yes, yeah. It runs through to.
Yeah, so we based each week. So all of our staff that got involved basically had to make a bake for the subsequent week that was on TV.
I bet it was pre-2019 because that's of course the dreaded year. I'm pretty sure it must have been a few years before that.
No, I thought it was 2019.
And Louise and Jen were about. I've lost track of time.
The
time flies in this place. We're in 2023, for goodness sake.
It is. Yeah, that is scary. But anyway, David, I have some good news.
I'm anticipating this now. You picked this up quite.
Last night, I finally won the Premier League in my Tottenham Hotspur Football Manager save.
Okay, right, okay. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I teased David. I said I got some big news that I want to share on the live, and David's like trying to guess what it is. Moving house.
Yeah, actual proper life missions.
This is. I started in October. It was my 5th season. It was so stressful.
Stressful. Playing a game.
Oh,
great.
You do not know how difficult this game is, but I've finally done it.
Oh, well done. Moving on. Yeah, by the next one now.
We are digressing, and we have spent 3 minutes not talking about rainwater harvesting, which we'll be talking much more detail in today's session. And obviously, we have our main topic, which we'll discuss on every show that we do, and which is for today is what is the environmental impact of rainwater harvesting.
So
obviously, we know it's environmental benefits, but how much of an impact does it have?
So yeah, there's certainly 4 or 5 things I particularly want to draw to people's attention. I think most people will hopefully know 2 or 3 of these, but hopefully I can share some further light on this. I think the most obvious one, which is one we talk about most on the channel, is to do with the speed of runoff. So this is more to do with stormwater. Of course, rainwater harvesting is very much an element of capturing stormwater. So then it can be reutilized later. So with the rainwater harvesting elements of taking that stormwater runoff, it not only reduces how much flow is going into the network, it also benefits the speed of that discharge. So it helps, of course, with prevention of floods because we're able to retain some of that water within the tank. Now, with flooding, of course, you generally get erosion, and if it's going from water which is off like pavements and car parks and that sort of stuff, you're going to have potentially oils and fuels and stuff on that land. So that could be washed off and go into contaminate soils as well. So the implementation of rainwater harvesting as kind of like a control layer onto a stormwater defense mechanism is really one of the standout features of rainwater harvesting to reduce the speed and the volume of water which has been discharged into the ground and to the local storage networks if it's going to like a storm drain, for example. So that's kind of point number 1. Tying nicely into that when we talk about flood prevention, so the speed, it also helps us in terms of droughts. So with rainwater harvesting, of course, if we have the solution in place, that gives us a reservoir of water to tap into when we have a long period of time without rainwater. whether this would be on a domestic level or certainly on a much bigger commercial scale, when we do have droughts, what happens is that we tap into the local reservoirs as a volume, a source of water, and we're pulling all that water out of that reservoir to support the humans in our daily lives. But of course, by pulling all that water out of that reservoir is kind of used by other living organisms, and that will affect their habitat. The fact that we're pulling all that water out of there, so that's really affecting the ecosystem to quite a significant level. So if we can subsidise the rainwater more locally via rainwater harvesting, that is a huge environmental impact, which is not only local to us, but of course it could be global as well. So the idea of rainwater harvesting in droughts, which is the counter argument to, I suppose, flooding, it's kind of like the two sides of the table. We have too much water and then we have no water. So in relation to rainwater harvesting for droughts, that is a super way for people to help protect the environments, the ecosystems, and general the natural balance and control of what's going on in nature. So something really important for people to think about. When we generally talk about rainwater harvesting in urban areas, kind of like stormwater again in urban areas. So if you think about a big city, generally when we talk about urban, it's a big city, the built-up developments. We generally have quite a lot of flood prevention devices in place. So we've got these big tall buildings, loads of tarmac and concrete everywhere. That water is then channeling down through into our storm network and then distributed away so we don't have flooding. But alongside of that, within cities, generally you get green spaces where parks, people can go and enjoy the environment. So the addition of rainwater harvesting onto arguably a solution which is already there can have a huge environmental impact, not only for people's well-being, but of course, again, introduction of birds, insects, all that sort of stuff within the city. So again, introducing ecosystems and habitat for other species within areas. So by addition of rainwater harvesting onto stormwater, which is kind of like retention, as I say, a small thing to think about can have super environmental impacts in terms of general habitats for all living things and plants.
Well, you certainly summed that very well. And when we think about the environmental impact that rainwater harvesting has, obviously it's not quite as obvious what it might seem. Obviously, the main one being reducing, especially on a domestic scale, reducing your mains water usage by up to 50%, which is a massive environmental impact.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's something else which I'll touch on a bit more. Do you want to say anything further, or I'll jump onto that point?
No, you go jump onto it.
I'll jump onto that point because, of course, with the substitution of using rainwater over mains water, we're very much reducing mains water demand. But of course, the manufacturing process to get that water to basically a very good standard for drinking, so we're getting rid of all the minerals and decontaminants and impurities within that water. So there is actually a manufacturing process and a carbon footprint in place to treat that water to get it to a suitable level. So with the introduction of rainwater harvesting, if we can substitute for 50% on a domestic level, commercial applications 80-92%, that is a huge carbon footprint saved for the manufacturing and reprocessing of mains water. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Well,
you're going to build on this now.
I am going to build on it because I found an interesting fact when I was doing research for this. And that's water firms in the UK use around 2% of all of the UK's electricity supply.
Okay.
So obviously, and a large part of that is treating water to a point where it can safely be used in homes for drinking, part of cooking, bathing, showering, all that sort of stuff. But as we mentioned, rainwater harvesting, you can use 50% of it for rainwater instead of mains water. So flushing your toilets, feeding the washing machine, external tap for garden irrigation. So if you're reducing 50% of the mains water usage, you're potentially, in a way, reducing 50% of the demand of water to be actually repurposed by these water firms.
Yeah, so that's, again, not only in terms of potentially the manoeuvring of that water through pumps and stuff, but it's the electrical demand, the maintenance and servicing. So in terms of financial benefit, there's huge implications on the whole of the network, not of course just in the UK, but globally as well. So rainwater harvesting, to have the opportunity to source water locally to the development is unbelievably good on a financial basis too.
And yeah, I was trying to build on the point I made earlier. It's like there is, pardon the pun, a trickle-down effect on the environment when it comes to rainwater harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mentioned there with at the very start, we spoke about it in last week's stormwater session. You can catch that if you missed it, where we talked about how stormwater attenuation is very much part of the water quantity parcels.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned with rainwater harvesting, it can be involved in that. It doesn't solve it, but it can be involved.
Yes.
Because you are collecting this water runoff from roof of the property, garage, all that sort of stuff, channel into the tank rather than going straight down into the storm drain.
Yep.
So you are withholding again a large volume of water from making its way down to potentially causing, erosion of riverbeds further downstream by holding it back and putting it to reuse.
Yes, exactly. For the benefit of not only living plants but the environment as well. So really is a super concept.
That's why my palms there. It's like a trickle down effect. It starts and then all the little benefits should trickle its way down. It's very smart. I do hear you say. But anyway, now it's time to jump to my favorite subject.
It's growing on me, Callum, but
it is very good, isn't it?
I'm glad that you introduced it. Yeah.
Well, the issue is all the news stories are a bit dreary. They seem to be. So we have to keep the energy up to make it a bit more
I'm hoping you start in negative and then going positive this week.
We'll see. But anyway, the first story that was covered in the news, I think a couple of weeks ago, is that water bills are set to increase, set by the biggest increase in almost 20 years as of April. So, like I said, it doesn't start off a bit too... We're getting there. We'll have to work on it. But anyway... As we know, the cost of living has increased over the past few years, or past few months. It's become a real issue in the UK, and even more now. There's set to be increases of the water prices by an increase of 7.5% for all UK homes. And I didn't realise this, but over 1 million homes already in the UK need help paying the water bills each month, and that's set to jump to 1.2 million. So a very large increase for people that actually are not able to afford to actually pay their water bills in the UK, which is something that I never realised. And this comes mainly due to the cost of energy on a commercial scale as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, it's roughly about all water firms in the UK use 2% of the UK's electricity. And because of the rising prices in energy, therefore, they need to increase their prices as well. So yeah, this is the kind of, rise in energy costs is not only affecting people at home, it's affecting businesses and firms as well. Because like I mentioned, the water companies use so much electricity, yet potentially, as we mentioned earlier, rainwater harvesting was used more regularly. That the fact that the energy used by these water firms would be less because they're having to treat less water to get it to a drinking standard.
As you say, it filters on down the chain like significantly. It's not just what's happening directly with you. If you think slightly outside of like a bit more on a commercial level, or certainly a national level, we should say, it has a significant impact overall.
So it has a what? It has a trickle-down effect.
A trickle-down effect.
Trickle-down effect. You got to remember that. You got to be on point with the water jokes, Dave. But yeah, so it does have very much a trickle-down effect, like you mentioned there, in the fact that it affects more. So just by simply implementing more systems, the kind of benefits of actually using the water kind of as the end user is there, but the benefits further down the trickle are there for others to see. You're going to love that. You're going to use that. You're going to use it.
I'm going to accidentally say it later today, and someone is going to in the office says, "What the heck are you on about?" Rainwater harvesting pun.
Yeah, we go check out the latest rainwater research session. You'll find out. So yeah, that's the first one. Water bills are set to rise, and the next news story we have, which is not UK based. Okay. It's not. I found this one, and I thought it was very interesting because it is quite close. Actually, it's very close. It's only over the channel, and that is France has experienced its record dry spell in winter. So they've gone 31 days since, so they've gone 31 days with less than 1 millimeter of rainwater since the 21st of Jan. and they're in winter. How not incredible? How unbelievably that's unbelievable in the fact that they're going through a drought in winter.
Yeah. Well, you do have, of course, seasonal loadings, and if you were to look at a kind of like climate station map, you generally have, of course, more millimeters of rainfall forecast for certain months per year. But that is kind of scary. That something so local to us, which is, of course,
literally over the channel.
Over the channel, they've got kind of water on a majority of their coastline. Yeah. So you would have thought they would get water off the ocean in some form or another. So they must be having some seriously chilly weather over in France.
Yeah, I mean, well, get this. The number of days without rain in winter has not been seen ever in France since records began in 1959. So it could have happened before. However, because they don't have records since, the late 50s, they cannot tell if this happened before.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is remarkable. Like I said, most of Europe's water reserves and reservoirs are low because of the extreme summer that we had last year. We saw that. In fact, most UK reservoirs are still below like pre-drought levels. They are still quite low, and it's happening all over Europe. There was a massive hot spell. Throughout Europe, and as it says in the middle of there, that came after Europe endured its second hottest year ever in 2022, with France, England, Spain, Italy setting new average temperature records, compounded by severe drought. And I think we mentioned in Rainwater research a few weeks ago that the UK is expected to go through yet another barren spell in the summer with a lot of dry weather and potentially even more droughts.
You'd like to say yay to that statement, wouldn't you? But when you follow it with more droughts, you're like, oh.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I sparked a bit of controversy in the office. And I don't know whether it's because I work for a rainwater harvesting manufacturer. However, when it comes to weather, I am all about moderation. And I'll tell you what, I hate the look of brown grass.
It's not pleasant.
It's horrific. I don't like it.
You also play football on it quite a bit.
Exactly. So I know this is a bit of a weird thing. I hate brown grass. It's an awful sight. It should just be green. So my point is, I like 3 or 4 days of really nice sunshine, really nice weather. And then I will accept 2, maybe 3 days of rain.
But not 4.
No, but it just ruins it. No.
I know what you're getting at. I kind of follow your meaning. Yeah.
Because I enjoy, say, 3, 4, maybe even 5 days of sunshine. But I then like 2 or 3 days of rainfall in order to supplement the ground and the plants. Because brown grass is rubbish to look at. It is. So I like moderation.
I understand that. And you do realize what you're saying when you say, I want 5 days of sunshine. That's going to be on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then you get rain on Saturday and Sunday. That's how it works. You're right.
I know, that's how it will work. But I don't mind the moderation. A lot of people are like, no, just enjoy the nice weather. It's not going to last forever. I'm like, yeah, but can you not see what's happening? Like moderation is what we need. But anyway, I can't control the weather, but that is my personal thing. But anyway, I think that news story is in itself remarkable in the fact that there's, like we said, mentioned, just literally over the channel, they're experiencing their dry spell in, over 60 years now?
More than that. If you said
1959.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just over 60 years.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. And this is because of climate change. There's no 2 ways about it. Is because of climate change. Our summers are getting hotter. We've recorded our hottest ever. We've upped our average temperatures. Like, our average temperatures are increasing. We're getting less rainfall, and as shown by that, there's more dry spells. We're still in a drought because the reservoirs are still low.
Yep.
Like, it's a real
It should be a wake-up call for people.
Yeah. And what do we need? Moderation. I'm winning the battle. I'm going to get more people on my side. But anyway, that is it for in the news. It's a bit. I warned it would be a bit dreary.
Bit gloomy.
The news
not dreary because it's an interesting topic. It's just
it is.
We would like to have a really nice,
I know,
positive.
But it's like bad. I guess the thing is, bad news sells. I think Tony Robbins always said, it's like, if you're walking down the street, this is obviously time ago because when newspapers was being sold. So it's like you walk past a newspaper outlet and it's like, sunny weather all day. You're like, oh, that's nice. And you walk straight past it. But instead, it's torrential rain and massive storms. Read all about it. You'll be like, oh, I'm going to read about that because that's bad news. Like, people don't want good news. They want bad news. Like, bad news sells. That's the worst thing. That's why I rarely listen. I don't watch the news. I rarely read it or listen to it because it's so bad and dreary. Hence why I stopped listening to the news during the pandemic, because I couldn't hack it. But anyway, we'll try to find better news stories. We'll try and find more miniature robots, because that was a fun story. That was a nice story. But anyway, I'll stop going on about stories. But anyway, now it's time to answer any and all questions that have come in during today's show. So we'll just get them up on the screen, and I believe we've got the first one in. And the first question is rainwater good for plants, David?
Yeah. So when we think about rainwater, certainly when you're comparing it to mains water, rainwater has the added benefit of coming down from the heavens, from the sky, and with that it's able to absorb some of the nitrogen that's within the air. So within rainwater, naturally you do have some nitrogen. Nitrogen is good, certainly if you listen to our wastewater sector. The nitrogen within, as a general compound or element, is very good at enhancing plant life. So with rainwater, with the addition of nitrogen, we have that nitrogen compound basically been absorbed by those plants and really benefiting their growth. So that's something to bear in mind in terms of rainwater. I mean, to compare that to mains water is very much treated. It's very much sterilized versus rainwater. So it's chemically treated to make it so it's possible, so it's safe for humans to consume. But with that, of course, we are adding in basically chlorine, and there are the various minerals within the water which aren't so good for the plants. So that's something kind of along the same topic. Rainwater has the addition of compounds we see in nature which are very beneficial for it. Because mains water is manufactured, we have additional things we don't normally see. So mains water is not so good for plants, certainly versus rainwater.
Yes, well, you made a good point about the nitrogen there. I mean, obviously, as it falls, it collects it in the atmosphere, and then it goes on to plants, which obviously in nature, that's why the rainwater is so beneficial.
Yeah, how the water cycle works.
Yeah. Yes. And if you're an avid watcher of Clarkson's Farm, he talks about... Right, don't you laugh. So if you watch Clarkson Farm, he talks about how they, with fertilizer, they use a lot of nitrogen. They spray a lot of nitrogen compound on crops to help fertilize them and help them grow. But you can do more environmental benefit ways, environmentally friendly ways, shall I say. So in this season, he got cows to basically, because it's going to sound a bit disgusting, but cow pat is very nitrogen rich. So obviously what he wanted to do was have cows go around the field. The hens go around, and what they do is, as they walk, they kind of push it into the ground. So it helps to keep putting nitrogen back in the soil. So it's a very, ye olden days farming technique. And because, like you say, rainwater is full of nitrogen, it's full of that compound that's actually really beneficial for plants in order for them to grow. Yeah, exactly. Which is very good for the plants and the environment. And also, there's another thing which I read about. I read about rainwater. So when your rain falls on your rooftops, you've got to imagine there's all sorts of stuff. There's like moss and also, it's going to sound a bit disgusting, bird poo. And what will happen is rainwater, well, as it falls on the roof, will actually collect some of the nitrogen and obviously feces from the bird poo. And as it goes basically into your system, or say if you've got a water butt, you can actually then water your plants, and basically that kind of fertilizer, that's all that nitrogen that's collected in feces, bird poo, will be
nutrients. We'll go with nutrients.
Nutrients, yeah. That's a better word. That's not so disgusting. But anyway, that's that one. And then on to the next question we have is, how can you collect rainwater cheaply? Interesting.
Okay. With collection of rainwater, the most obvious way, I suppose, of collecting rainwater is just trying to collect it off a surface down into a container. Now, we at Graph, of course, would promote the use of like a water butt, for example, so an above ground tank, come in very lots of different colors, lots of different volumes. Of course, that water is once that water butt's in place, it's going to cost you anything from, I don't know, 25 to £300, depending on volume and the style.
Yeah.
You can then basically use that water butt for 5, 10, however many years you want, and you've always got that potential basin of water to tap into to water your plants. You could, of course, also stick a pump in it and use it for outside cleaning, jet washing as well. So that is just a really simple way to collect some rainwater to reuse it later. You could also talk about not quite so cheap, but something that always has to be done anyway. When we talk about SUD solutions, so sustainable urban drainage systems, we have to have a flood prevention mechanism in place in urban city areas. Now, you have to dig down, put a crate system in place, generally speaking, to capture that flood water, that storm water, and then it's released into the network. There's not much more that needs to be done to a solution that's already really going into the ground to increase that storage volume. And of course, we can then retain that water, so then we can reuse it later to support green field sites. So with rainwater harvesting in general, the best way you can do it is add on to an existing solution like SUDS, or you can really just look at some sort of above ground solution, certainly on domestic level, so you can use it for outside cleaning and watering your plants, irrigation.
Perfect. That answers that one. And then the next question that we've had come in today: can rainwater be used for showers? I feel like it's going to be a quick answer.
It's not a quick answer.
Oh, go on.
I can elaborate on as much on a little bit.
Go on, you riff with it. Go on.
Okay, so with showering, this is really a bit of a mixed topic in terms of the advice that's available. If you were to jump online and generally look at this question, there's quite a lot of advice from countries which aren't the UK, which suggests that you can use rainwater for showering. And in those potentially all countries, they have got standards to do that. Generally here in the UK, I wouldn't advise it without potentially filtering, purifying the water first. Basically, you're going to, as you mentioned earlier, you can get, of course, with the runoff of the water coming off the roofs, you can get like moss and potential other things on your roofs, which will channel that rainwater down into your underground tank. So we really want to try and cleanse that water the best we can. So with filtering, you just really have a standard filtration system in place to get rid of most of the impurities like discoloration, that sort of thing. You can then look at purifying the water via UV. And then if you were to use it in a stage further for things like showering and potential sinks, where it's going to come in contact with human skin, you need to really look at like deionization to get all the other minerals and stuff out of the water. And you can also look at disinfection to a much higher level. Certainly on the UV, you need to get a maintenance system in place to really look after that UV system, so we are disinfecting it as much as we can. So certainly is achievable, but certainly here in the UK, the advice is to basically upgrade a standard rainwater harvesting system, so the quality of the water is much better.
Perfect. That answers that one. I thought it'd be a very abrupt answer of a no. I mean, when people always ask me, it's always no.
So strictly in the UK, the general advice is no. If you were to look potentially online, you'll see reports from America, Australia, and all these sorts of places, basically, where they're not quite so strict in terms of the.
Because that is a very good point in itself. Because a lot of people get confused with rainwater harvesting because when they read stuff online, they're not realizing what region the news is coming from, the reports are coming from. So it's very important to check if you are looking for rainwater harvesting to very much look for information, help from people that are in your region, obviously the UK, because there's stuff that come out of the US that make people think, oh, I can't use it for that. So, for example, in the US, it's actually illegal to use for rainwater harvesting in some states. And some people actually get confused thinking rainwater harvesting is illegal. But I'll tell you off camera the actual reasons, but it was a law made in the 1800s, and basically it's not been reviewed since. So there's actually some states in the US where rainwater harvesting is actually illegal.
Unbelievable.
But the reasons for it are very stupid. In my head, I'm not saying US laws are very stupid and they should come after me. But that one really is. But anyway, thank you for your time today, David. I hope you enjoyed it, and you were back in the hot seat. We missed you last week. The viewers missed you, although they did enjoy Lisa.
I'm sure they did. I mean, got to change it up sometime.
Yeah, but
I mean, I talked about sustainable underground drainage system at least 4 or 5 times today.
Oh
So,
yeah, so maybe we'll just
maybe I'll get tip Lisa to start talking about rainwater harvesting in her session.
Yeah, that'd be good. Mix it up. But anyway, thank you, one and all, for watching and joining us for today. David, thank you for your time as always.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, glad you are back in the hot seat. And yeah, thank you, one and all, for taking part. And we'll be back next week to talk about David's favorite subject, which is
wastewater treatment. And
we'll be back with a wastewater wisdom session live. So have a great week, one and all, and we will see you on the next one.